Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners.
So something that's maybe residential today, maybe the city envisions as being commercial down the road. And that fact is very, very important when you come to some of these specific forced appreciation strategies.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I'm your host, Billy Keels. And guess what? We're back for another amazing conversation. Today, get your pen, your paper out, or get your iPad and your whatever electric pencil. Really, you're going to want to take notes today because it's really, really cool. And before we even get into the conversation, thank you so much for continuing to leave your honest written reviews as well as your ratings. If you haven't, we've got a nice little short video. It will show you exactly how to do that. For those of you who continue to tag us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, really appreciate you. None of this would be possible without you. And if you want to check out any of the previous episodes, well over 350 some odd episodes at this point in time, it's probably even over that. Just go to firstgencp.com/podcasts. Once again, it's firstgencp.com/podcasts, and you can find out every single episode, transcripts, audio, video, all that kind of stuff. So today's really, really cool because we're going to talk about something I don't think we've ever really talked about it before, but if you want to expand your portfolio, you want to be able to do that from the comfort of your home or your office or whatever it is, it's probably important that you understand about some different development opportunities. Specifically on the front end of that, there are these things called entitlements. And when you understand them, you can force appreciation. It's a great way to, just more knowledge that can help you get to your goals. So we're going to get to the conversation that I had with the founder of Telosa Property Group, as well as lothackers.com. And that's going to be with Mike Marshall. And we're going to get to that just after this. So if you want to understand how using forced appreciation strategies can be the key to unlocking the potential in your long distance investing portfolio, then guess what? Today's the conversation you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. Yes, I did say it, the very last word. You know why? Because today's guest, he not only started in real estate at the ripe old age of 12. I cannot wait to hear about that. He also, post-college, he became a leading authority in the land use planning space. That sounds really interesting. He even spent 15 years in planning and zoning in multiple states. I think I have an idea at least of 2 of those states. And you know what? It gives me great pleasure to welcome today the founder of TelosaPropertyGroup.com as well as LotHackers.com, Mr. Mike Marshall. Mike, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Hey, man, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Love your energy and also the fact that you're going to talk to us about some things that, you know what, we may not talk about all the time. So everybody, get your pen, get your paper out because Mike's going to be dropping lots and lots of knowledge. So no pressure, Mike. So here we go. Here we go, everybody. Mike, as you know, you're going to get at least 5. You're going to get 2 in the beginning. You're going to get 3 at the end. So at least 5 questions. Chances are I'm going to ask you a couple extras in between. But I want to get started with question number 1. And that's just to help everybody in the Going Long family understand, where is it that you call home nowadays?
Yeah, nowadays, outside of Dallas, Texas is our home. Originally we were from California, but we've been out here in Dallas area for about a year and a half now.
All right, fantastic. And I did say I knew at least 2 states. So maybe Mike's going to tell us a little bit more about that. Appreciate that, Mike. And then also too, man, we love positivity here. I personally love positivity. The more positivity you can get, the better it is for everybody. Can you share with us what's the most positive thing that's happened to or for you in the last 24 hours?
I think probably I'd have to say, today is my son's 14th birthday. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. Just trying to, get into that whole mindset of him becoming a teenager and getting close to driving age here in the States. And so, that's pretty exciting, on the personal front, on the business front, it's just been, we're growing, and we're getting a lot of new opportunities to be on podcasts like this and to sort of spread our message. And so even within the last, 24 hours, there's been some really positive things in that sense. So we're just really excited about being able to get out there and spread that message.
Oh, fantastic, man. And you know what? Congratulations. I know what it's like when they get up in those teenage years and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Enjoy it, man. Enjoy it. Don't they go by so fast? The years just
it's amazing. They always say that and you never believe it, and then when you're there, it's all of a sudden, here you are.
Yeah, exactly. What the parents said was going to happen is actually happening. So
yeah.
Listen, Mike. So one of the things that the entire Going Long family already knows about me, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I think I may have even told you that before. And that means that sometimes I try to do things that are impossible, like trying to tell your entire backstory. I don't know. I dropped a couple of like nuggets there. I think I tried to use maybe like 2.5 seconds. I was never going to tell your story back in 2.5 seconds. So I need your help. If you could tell us your backstory in your own words, and because you're our special guest, you can take as much time as you want, just to help us understand a little bit more about you. And also, too, if you could help me out with one other thing is, if you could really talk to us about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey, Mike, and then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Sure. You had mentioned early on, getting started at the age of 12, and that is really true. My dad, started in real estate, and he just did it on the side. This is back probably in like the late 80s. And he was doing things like, he bought like maybe like a handful of single family houses. He was really holding them. At that time, the whole flipping process wasn't really such as a big thing as it is now. And so it's more just buy, fix, and hold. And so that was his thing. He did that with a business partner, and he had like a couple multifamily buildings along the way, just small ones. But my experience was really out there on the ground with him, like working on those things, so like putting up new roofs and, painting the houses and stuff like that. And at 12 years old, not being terribly thrilled about not being with your friends, you had it was a unique experience at times, And so, but I learned a lot in terms of like the hard work ethic and everything like that. And that ultimately led into me having the real estate bug, and so, but I didn't really get into real estate specifically until much later. I went in through college, had a degree coming out of college that was nothing related to real estate, but I started working for a city where I lived. And through that, I still had this real estate interest, but I wanted to do something that was in my professional career that kind of helped me move the sticks in terms of the real estate game as well. And so I found this whole world of planning, and so zoning and planning. And yeah, it wasn't directly real estate investing per se, but it was certainly related. And so I made a transition over to that just by, networking within the organization and, learning along the way. I was able to have an opportunity to move into that profession. And so I made that shift. And ultimately, that led to a situation where I worked for local jurisdictions in California as well as Texas over the next 15 years, doing a wide variety of different projects, everything from custom single family houses to 1,200 lot residential subdivisions, medical office buildings, TV and movie studio campuses, all sorts of stuff. But it was all within this realm of land use and entitlements. And so if you think of the overall development process, you really have, everybody really thinks about the building permit stage as being the last part of it. And that is the case. And so that's the last or the third part. But then there's a second part that's your engineering phase where you're doing all your underground improvements and whatnot. But then there's the first phase, and that's the entitlement phase. And that's when people see people arguing like at public hearing meetings and stuff like that, the planning commission, city council, all of those things. That's where you're getting your project approved originally and getting the right to actually build or utilize the property in a certain way. And that process actually adds a lot of value in of itself. And so ultimately what it was for me is I ended up realizing that there was this gap or this chasm between the knowledge that was held at the local planning offices and maybe the lack of knowledge or the lack of opportunity that was made aware to like investors and developers, all over the place. And so there was this communication gap or this information gap. And I realized, well, I can kind of help bridge that gap. And so I started working with some of the developers I created relationships with at that city to work on other projects in other cities. And I did that for a handful of months or so. And then I was able to kind of build that to a place where I was able to step out on my own and do my own consulting. And so I started doing that. And we're doing all sorts of types of projects, subdivisions, rezoning types of projects, everything within that entitlement space again. And then I ended up looking at it where I was getting people coming to me, asking me for help to basically teach them how to do the same thing. And that kind of was the impetus behind creating like a coaching program. The TolosaPropertyGroup.com website is all about our coaching program. That's what led to that. And then so I've been doing that, and I've been doing our own projects, and then also doing project management for some of our clients as well since then. And so it's been a transition. It's been a long journey to get to where we're at, but it's a very focused and kind of specialized niche.
Well, and I appreciate that, that it is very, as a specialized, focused kind of niche where you really have deep knowledge. I want to draw on some of that knowledge because this is not one of the areas that we tend to spend a lot of time on. And I know we're going to talk about some like forced appreciation kind of stuff. But if we could go back to like your bread and butter, like this whole entitlement piece, because it sounded like there was some emotion that can happen in these city council meetings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Talk to us, just because no one's ever talked to us about this. So talk to us about that first phase, which is the entitlement phase. Really, what is happening there? Why is it important for someone who, if you want to get started in your real estate journey, or if you want to begin to expand, what is happening in that entitlement phase, and why is it so important? Where's the big opportunity there?
Sure. So I'll answer the second part first. So why it's more important is because it adds certainty to an otherwise uncertain search situation. So from a developer's perspective, they primarily just want to go vertical. They want to put sticks in the ground. They want to build and that's where they make their money, is in the construction side of it. But in order to do that, they need these entitlements or these approvals from the local government. And a lot of those approvals are discretionary in nature, meaning that you'll have a planning commission and or city council, 5-7 members of that council that has the ultimate authority to decide whether or not your project is going to be approved or not. And that's a specialty niche to be able to understand how to navigate that process. Yes, there's certainly a real estate component to that, but there's also a lot of soft skills, a lot of negotiation, a lot of politics in some instances as well. And so understanding how to navigate that can become difficult. And so what happens is that these developers will see that as a risk. And they actually have a phrase for it called entitlement risk. And they just assume that if I can get a project or a piece of property that's already entitled, then I've circumvented that risk and I'm able to move forward and profit as I normally would. And it's a better situation. I have certainty again, where otherwise I wouldn't. So if I'm going to go through the entitlement process, there's an element of uncertainty, especially if it's not something that you specialize in or that you haven't done before or what have you. So there's at least the perception of uncertainty. And so because you can add certainty, that's where you're adding value in most instances.
Okay, fantastic. So that helps us on really what the benefit could potentially be. And then the first part of that was really just helping us understand what's really happening in these things. And I think you've given us a little bit of an insight to it right now, but just for that person who's like, entitlement, I don't even know what that is. That sounds like such a big word. It's kind of scary to me.
Right. Yeah. So entitlement is like a big word. You know how it is with like any vocabulary. It's always trying to make those people feel smarter or better than they really are. But reality is that it's just an approval essentially. But what's important about it is that it's a vested approval. In other words, it sits over the property in perpetuity as long as you utilize it within a specific period of time. And what's happening in that process is that, let's just take, for example, an office building. What's happening is that, you have an architect and an engineer that's submitting plans to the planning department at the city, and they're going to review it for consistency with land use. So like zoning, is this an appropriate use for this zone? If it's an office building, is it appropriate that it's sitting in the middle of a residential zone? Maybe or maybe not, but there's certain criteria that they're using to be able to analyze and look as whether or not that land use is consistent with the surrounding development patterns. Is it consistent with like the zoning code and the general plan for the city? So they're looking at a lot of land use consistency issues. Does it make sense to have that use in that location? So that's the very first element of it. But then from there, it goes into we're going to review the actual building and structure itself. And when I mention that, people will often go towards building code and things of that nature. That is very important, obviously, but that comes later. The entitlement process is looking at how the buildings actually interface with the community at the street level. So the building height, the architecture, landscaping, the number of parking spaces, how the site is designed from like a site plan perspective. So it's higher level. In a sense, it's a little bit conceptual in a way. It's not about structural engineering, and it's not about, like plumbing and mechanical stuff. It's not about all those important things. It's about really higher level, looking at land use, looking at compatibility with surrounding land uses. So like if you have an office building and you have residents that are right next to it, how high is that building? How is it impacting those residents? Do you have to have land landscape buffers to be able to buffer the view from those residents. It's a lot about interaction with the surrounding community or surrounding properties. And so it's taking that higher level look at it and then granting that approval. And again, once that's approved, it's vested. And then that next owner or the developer has a certain period of time in which they can go and act on that approval and get their building permits approved. And so again, it's higher level conceptual, but it's very, very important in terms of, making sure that you're getting that proper interaction dealt with.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, as you look at getting the right interactions, making sure that you get what you need, I guess I guess thinking about it from the going along family member's perspective, it's like, okay, well, is this in this very first early stage, is this something that's going to be an eyesore? Is it something that fits in with the overall look and feel of this new area that we want to develop for the future, which I guess is also why it's really important for someone who is interested, or someone would need to understand the different city council people. What are their ideas? What do they want to do with a specific city or maybe a specific area of land, and be able to, I guess, as you said before, like negotiate that or be able to be a part of the vision that they had set forth for, whenever they were elected. Would that be a fair kind of a
That's very
recap?
accurate. Yeah. Yeah, that's very accurate. In fact, there's usually a document that's adopted by each city. It's called either a comprehensive plan or a general plan, depending on where you're at. And within that, they'll have something that's called a land use element. And that land use element will talk about what they envision for the future. And so it'll literally, a lot of times we'll have a map and it'll say, in the future, this is what we envision these properties in terms of their general plan land use designation. So something that's maybe residential today, maybe the city envisions as being commercial down the road. And that fact is very, very important when you come to some of these specific forced appreciation strategies.
Fantastic. Which is, so you can already read my mind because I wanted to go in that direction. So one of the things that I'm sure people are asking is, well, okay, is this zoning? Is this not zoning? Because I know, like, you think of some cities where, like, you literally can have a religious center next to a residential, which is next to a commercial, which is, I think, one of the places in the state that you're living now has some kind of unique zoning or things like that. But then there are other places where if you don't fit in with literally the same type of structure, then it can't happen. But when I hear you say entitlement, does that have anything to do with zoning? Yes, no, kind of what are the differences? Yeah,
it certainly does have a lot to do with zoning. And that's probably like the first hurdle that you're trying to get across is, based on the current zoning that's in place at the time that you're working on the property, what are the allowable land uses? And so is it allow for, single family? Is it allow for multifamily? Does it allow for commercial? What are the allowable land uses? Does that fit your plan for the property? And if not, then you start looking at the possibility of rezoning the property to something that is more in line with what you're trying to accomplish. And so, yes, you do have to meet those zoning standards. And, the zoning code and the zoning map itself will lay out exactly what your property is zoned for, obviously, but then it'll look at what are the surrounding properties are zoned for as well. And there are those anomalies like churches, like here in the States, there's federal law that really kind of makes it hard for jurisdictions to say no to churches, especially in certain circumstances. So there are certain uses that are kind of special uses in a way that can have a little bit more flexibility in terms of zoning. But in general, the zoning, the intent is to be able to separate uses from each other that have the potential to impact one another. So having historically how zoning started was how you have a pig farm next to a residential development, obviously big impacts that come from that. And so they want to separate these uses. And some areas where you have zoning, it's very simple, where it says, here's residential, commercial, industrial, and that's it. But in most instances, it's really more finite, and they break each of those into much smaller categories.
Okay, gotcha. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, I guess one other question that comes to mind when you're thinking of the zoning and being able to do that, and we're kind of blurring the lines here, but is that something that as an individual you can just do? You've got this great idea, you want to add to your portfolio, you're living in a different city, and you really want to, have a new location, and you want to be a part of a development project. And is that something you can do by yourself? Is that something that you need to get, who do you need on your team to actually help you have things rezoned?
Sure. Technically it depends on what you're doing, but if you're looking at just a rezoning project, you can do that yourself. You don't even have to really own the property. You do have to have the property owner's authorization So they would need to sign on documents saying that they're giving you that authority to do that. But in general, the biggest asset, the biggest team member that you're going to have on your team with regards to entitlements is usually going to be a civil engineer. And even if it's something for rezoning, even in a rezoning situation, they'll still want some sort of plan to work off of, some sort of concept plan. And that civil engineer is going to be able to do that for you. And, your big focus obviously is working remotely. And to kind of answer that question, you really can do this remotely. It's all about having the right team members in place. And so a civil engineer is a really big one. Sometimes it comes down to getting like a land use planner to be able to kind of help bring the whole project through the process. Or in some instances, it's even an attorney, like a local attorney that has those contacts with the planning commission and city council. They kind of act as a lobbyist in a way as well. But those are like your primary team members. So it's a civil engineer, a land use planner, an architect, and an attorney. And those are in like the most largest types of projects you would need those. And some of the more basic, straightforward ones, you may not need all of those. You probably would be able to be just great with a civil engineer.
Gotcha. I appreciate you going into such detail. That's really helpful. And I'm sure you've just cleared up a lot of questions that many people had on their mind. You started talking about it earlier, and it's something I mentioned at the very beginning. So as you think about the entitlements or the zoning, and you're thinking about this, you're living in one place and you want to expand your portfolio. Talk to us a little bit. Excuse me. Talk to us a little bit about how does the forced appreciation play come into effect, and how are you able to add more value through using forced appreciation strategies? And one of the things I want to say, because a lot of times we talk about, with real estate, it's appreciation, it's depreciation, it's cash flow, and it's amortization. But very few times do we talk about, like, there are very specific strategies within appreciation that you can do. Sometimes you just find it, sometimes you force it, and sometimes things just happen. It's passive and it happens over time, et cetera, et cetera. So I love the fact that you specifically talk about the forced appreciation strategies. Maybe you could dive a little bit more into that and how you see that adding value as well.
Sure. So I make the distinction, and you're kind of inferring it as well, is that there's market-wide appreciation that we think of when our house goes up in value. That's what we all experience and are used to. Yeah. But then there's forced appreciation. And so with market appreciation, there's nothing that we can do to really affect that. That's just happening to us at all times, whether it's in appreciating or depreciating. But in a forced appreciation situation, there's certain strategies that we can proactively implement to actually force that appreciation on a property, regardless of really what the market is doing for the most part. That's not an absolute. You can't ignore the market completely, but in large part, you can go and force appreciation on these properties as a result of implementing these strategies. And then from there, within the forced appreciation bucket, there are like operational things that you can do, like on a multifamily property. If you're going to rehab like the units, if you're going to raise the rents, anything you can do that in effect raises the rents or decreases your expenses on a multifamily building, right? That has that's basically forced appreciation as well. Mm-hmm. But what I'm talking about are more things that are within the space of zoning codes and development codes, and how we can really go about changing the use of the property. That's the central core of what we're doing, is we're forcing appreciation by changing the use of the property. And the strategy that you go and you use to do that depends on the circumstances that you're in. So there are a variety of strategies that you can do and implement to change the use of the property, therefore forcing the appreciation.
Fantastic. And that's helpful. Because it's basically, this is more of a proactive approach. It's more about saying, okay, well, what elements do we have at our disposal to be able to say, okay, we want to change something to be able to add value on a particular asset that you have. And whether that's a single family, whether it's a multifamily, a large or small multifamily, or even a retail residential, it's just good to know that these are the types of strategies. Could you maybe give us one of the strategies that you found that's really effective for forcing appreciation? Of course, not giving anybody advice or any of that kind of stuff. You're just sharing an example that you've seen work in the past. So everybody speak to your own professionals about how applicable this could potentially be for your situation.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll just go with the biggest bang for the buck. It's the one that we've been talking about, is these rezoning projects. I'll give you an example of one that we're working on right now. There's one that we're working on right now in Florida where it was zoned as agricultural land. It had a single family house on each of 3 different parcels, and we rezoned it to something that would allow for multifamily. And so what's really interesting about this is that you can go and get an appraisal done, and have an appraiser will give you the appraisal for the property as it is today, currently zoned as agricultural. And then they'll give you a valuation based on a hypothetical approval of that rezoning to, in this case, it was called a planned development zoning designation. And so they'll give you two different valuations. So you can look and see what the difference is between that. Is it really worth that lift to go and do that? And in this case, it's a situation where the acquisition of all the properties was about 1.4 million. And then after rezoning the property, the actual valuation was about 2.6. Wow. And so it can be really huge in some instances. Now, please don't misunderstand me. That's not average. That's not normal. But these bumps are pretty common, and I'm not saying they're all 7-figure bumps, but there are a lot of them that are very much like that. And so the biggest bang for the buck, I'd say, is really rezoning the property. And again, the reason for that is just that it's a discretionary approval. There's a board of 5 to 7 people that are going to make that decision. And so that's perceived as though that there's a risk for not getting that approved. And so that's why developers don't want to do that. They'd rather get something that's already zoned in place for them already. So that is the biggest bang for the buck. And that's a situation where you really only need a civil engineer. And most oftentimes there's not a lot of plans and things that you need to do ahead of time. So there's not a lot of expenses comparatively to other types of forced appreciation projects.
Fantastic. Well, when you look at these different types of forced appreciation projects, and you've given us a very concrete example of what can take place, I also want to make sure that everyone heard what Mike just said. He talked about a project that they had in Florida, and he's in Texas, right? And so I don't know what extent you do that purely remotely, how frequently you actually have to make a trip to Florida for these types of projects. Maybe you could also kind of give us an idea what that looks like.
Yeah, it's very rare that I go out to the project site, and in this instance, we just got the property rezoned and approved last month, and I've still never been to the property, and we have civil engineers, we have agents on the ground, we have, we have a broker on the ground as well, but we've never made, an appearance there at all. I've only, over the last 2 years, I've only been to a project site once. And that was just because we had a partner that we were working with that was local, and they just was asking for us to be out there and kind of help them and be there present. But I didn't have to be there. So there's never been an instance where I had to actually be on the ground. Now, that's being said, if you're just first starting out, I'd suggest, trying to pick somewhere that's within a 2 to 3 hour radius of where you're working, just to be able to get that experience and be at the meetings themselves. Even if you have a civil engineer that's running it and speaking, and you're not going to speak at the meeting, I get that completely. But at least being there and seeing it going on for the first one is always advisable, but it's not necessary by any means at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's very similar to my experience, right? I mean, on a different level, but living here in Europe and investing in assets that are back in the US and being able to, there are certain times it makes sense. It's just it's a good business decision to be in a room or to be in a specific area or be with your team or to vet team members and things like that. So I appreciate you sharing that. I really appreciate you diving into some detail to really help us understand this area that many of us have maybe not heard of or have had very limited exposure to. But here's one of the things, Mike. Like, we've got to get to the going long final 3. I told you I was going to ask you 5 questions. You got 2 in the beginning, you got 3 at the end here. And with your permission, because you're our special guest today, I would like to go ahead and get started with the going long final 3. Are you ready?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right, man. I knew you're born ready. You're ready for this stuff. So, and I told you this before, like, I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, but I've called Europe home for over 2 decades now, which is hard to believe. It feels like I just got here 2 days ago. But no, it's been well over 2 decades. I've got a couple gray hairs to show for it. So everybody check us out on the video version if you're not already. Plus, Mike's got these cool 3 letters behind you that I'm not going to tell you what they are because I kind of want to tease it, and you go check us out on the video version. Anyway, nice. So here's the question. So I'm always curious, like, since I've been living over here in Europe for a while, and I never thought I'd get here. So, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or still on your bucket list to visit?
Still on my bucket list. My whole family is from Wales. and I never been there, I've never anything like that. So I want to get to Cardiff. I want to get out there and check that out, so that's probably the top on my list right now.
Oh, very cool. Nice city. I will talk about it afterwards. There's really cool hotel there. I'll recommend to you. So,
Nice.
So cool. So Cardiff, so get over to Wales. Fantastic. Question number 2, and this has a lot to do with, well, you've talked to us about the different positive impacts you've made and the massive experience that you have. I'm going to make an assumption that not every single thing that you've tried has gone according to plan. You probably had a couple of failure events along the way. Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily want you to think about the failure event or reflect on it too much, but just draw from the experience. Because what I'd really love for you to do is share with me and the Going Long family, what is one lesson that you would share with us that we need to hear? Because when we hear this lesson, it's going to minimize the probability of, 1, us making the exact same mistake. 2, it's going to help us to put different strategies, tactics, and actions in place to minimize the probability of whatever happened or didn't happen happened. So what's the one lesson you'd share with us?
I think the whole phrase, trust but verify comes to mind. And I'll tell you specifically, with regards to these entitlements, like I mentioned, it's the discretion of these planning commissions and city councils. And I've had one instance in particular where I had the city manager of the city, the mayor of the city, all these prominent people really make some, really positively support our project. And we had the impression that we had the support of the council, planning commission, and everything else. And sparing all the drama, ultimately it didn't get approved. It got denied. And we trusted, what we were hearing from the officials. But at the end of the day, everybody is kind of a political animal to a degree. And, when it comes down to it, people are going to, protect themselves rather than, their ideal regarding specific property or what have you. And so I would just say that, you just got to make sure that you verify, trust, plug all the holes, and then ultimately just accept the fact that unfortunately, sometimes some of these things just don't work out. Not every project makes it to the finish line. And so it's very much a law of averages kind of thing. But I will say this, that, the ones that have been denied that I would say are quote unquote failures, if you will, like those are fewer and far between, because we're able really to manage the process throughout to where we can minimize and mitigate those risks. So it is pretty rare, but ultimately just make sure that, you're prepared for the fact that not every one of them will be successful, and just make sure that you verify, with the things that you're hearing from people.
I appreciate that. So trust but verify. I think there was even a late president who shared that same phrase. I think around 1986, something like that. So appreciate you sharing that. And then also I like to just kind of finish things up with feeding our brain with even more knowledge, this time book knowledge. So you got to take the theory that you're going to talk about and share with us and put that into practice. If not, it just becomes, not really much not much practicality to it. But anyway, I would love for you to share what's one book with us that you want to share today, Mike.
You know what? I was thinking originally of that book, Profit First was the first one, but I think I see this one on your background, man. Is that The Creature from Jekyll Island?
Oh, yeah.
That's one of my favorites, man. That is one of my favorite books. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Just the history behind it, but then just so eye-opening. And I probably one of the ones that like changed my view on like money and the system as it is. And I can't recommend that one enough. It's a long book, but it's so worth it.
So worth it. So worth it. And I will tell everybody, I think you all have heard me say this before. It's the number one book that I recommend, no matter, hands down. Like it literally changed my entire perspective around, just currency that many people will call money, and just the way that it's produced, and the way that, there's so much to that book. So yes, so The Creature from Jekyll Island, we will take that. We'll include it in the show notes. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And, I just, every single time these conversations just fly by, like they literally fly by, Mike. I'm thinking, we're starting out and you're telling us about, hanging out at 12 years old and you're doing the roofs and you're thinking, well, hang on a second, my buddies are out playing, but I'm here hanging out with dad. And we're doing this and we're doing that. And wait a second. But you get through all of this experience that you didn't even realize, right? And then you go away, and then you grow up and you go to college and you're realizing, hey, I want to do something else. And you as you're going out and you're doing the planning and the zoning thing, and you have these entitlements, and you realize, well, hang on a second, there's this massive opportunity, because now I understand this stuff over here on the left. Right. I actually also kind of came from this background on the right, because I watched my dad when he was putting these different places together and saw exactly what kind of lifestyle it was able to provide.
Yeah.
And wow, there's an opportunity here. So how can I actually bring these two worlds together and add value to others? You've given us multiple, explanations in terms of the entitlements and the zoning and the different ways that we can use strategies to force appreciation and being able to do it in an area. And, well, you can almost do it from the convenience of your home. Like you're talking about being in Texas, and you were just giving us a very concrete example of what was taking place in Florida to a place that, in this specific instance, you didn't have to go to. You've given us like a masterclass. And so everybody, I know I can hear them already, Mike. They're going, yeah, Billy, just ask him the question, please. So here's the question. Sure. I really want to know, what is the best way for the Going Long family to find out more about you, more about what you have going on at TolosaPropertyGroup.com, as well as LotHackers.com?
Yeah, absolutely. Really simply, we have a coaching program where we show people how to do these entitlements, how to locate these opportunities and bring it through the whole process. And that's at TolosaPropertyGroup.com. If you go there, you can also set up like a free discovery call. You'll set up some time on my calendar and we'll talk and chat and see if it fits into your business model. Truthfully, it's not for everybody, but I think it's really worthwhile having the conversation just to expose yourself to the opportunity and what's out there. And then at LotHackers.com, we're really more about our due diligence services and really more spreading the message of how to find these opportunities to the wider real estate community. So whether it be brokers, agents, developers, et cetera, we have a lot of services over there that are really helpful. So one side at Tolosa Property Group is our coaching. Lot Hackers is more service oriented. And so that's what we're about. That's what we're focused on right now.
All right. Fantastic. Well, listen, Mike, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And yeah, there you go. Going Long family. He just shared it with you. So you're good. You're good. You're good. Listen, on behalf of the entire Going Long family, I just want to say thank you very much for deciding to invest your time with us and share your knowledge with us today. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you so much.
All right. Perfect. Listen, give me like 15 seconds. I'm just going to say a couple of words to the Going Long family and then I'll get you out of here. So
sounds good.
Listen, everyone, I need my mic. If not, I would drop it. But here's the thing, because Mike left us so much knowledge. He left you with really a masterclass on what's happening on both planning, zoning, how you can force appreciation, how you can add value to your overall long distance portfolio. He talked to you about, well, he's in one place and was able to do that in another. So take today's conversation, literally listen to it 2, 3, 4 times, share it with friends, with family, talk about these concepts that Mike just shared with you. And while you're doing that, going from theory to practice, heck, even reach out to Mike. He just made it really easy for you to get time on his calendar. So while you're doing that, I'll be here preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much.